This is the Next Bite of Life podcast, the place to be to hear personal stories from expats, digital nomads, and everybody else taking their next bite of life. Thank you for joining me in another episode of Next Bite of Life podcast. My name is Kem Casinelli. Today I've got a very exciting guest. His name is Travis Luther, and he's the author of the latest book called The Fun Side of the Wall: Baby Boomer Retirement in Mexico. Welcome to the show, Travis.
Hey, thanks for having me, Kem.
How are you?
I'm good. Like everybody else, I'm trying to navigate our new reality. And I think, as you probably know, that's especially trying as a couple of people who love to get out and travel. But, talking to people about travel is the next best thing, I guess.
Yes. I know it's the new normal. That's what the government keeps referring to it over here. So it's going to be really exciting to find out what happens in the next few weeks. But, all we can do is hang in there.
That's right.
Now, the first thing I have to mention is the title of the book. I absolutely love it. The Fun Side of the Wall. Because forever we've been led to believe that the US is actually the fun, better side of the wall. But you're
Right.
saying Mexico is the fun side.
Yeah. I actually, that came from somebody that I interviewed as part of the research for the book. The original title of the book was Where the Buffalo Roam: Baby Boomer
Oh,
Retirement in Mexico. And that was kind of a nod to the Home on the Range song,
yeah.
and the idea of the American citizen as the Western moving buffalo. But then
Yes.
I was down in Mexico, finishing up some research and interviewing another couple down there, and the guy was talking about the election and whether or not the people in Mexico were going to be frustrated with Americans down there because Trump had been elected.
Yeah.
And he said that one of the people in Mexico told him, "Oh, don't worry about it. You're on the fun side of the wall." And I thought that is such a telling statement about just the graciousness of the people in Mexico, and almost their open mindedness. And I thought
Yeah.
it just fit the book so much better. So I stole that from them, and the title became The Fun Side of the Wall: Baby Boomer Migration into Mexico.
It's fantastic. I saw it. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is, because I went to the last time I was in Mexico was, oof, I'm going to date myself here, at least 30 years ago, because my uncle used to live there. And I
Uh-huh.
always considered it fun. I mean,
Uh-huh.
so when I saw it, I go, yeah, yeah. Now people are discovering it, of course, which
Right.
they should, because it's a great country and it's fantastic that people are moving down there.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Now, this fantastic book is a culmination of like 500 people that you interviewed for this book. How long did that take?
The whole book itself took nearly 12 years because, you may or may not know this, but the book started as my master's thesis project in the sociology department at the University of Colorado, Denver. And I got
I do
interested.
know that.
I got interested in expats and where people were moving around the world, and why they were moving back in 2007. And so I had, as part of some preliminary research for a thesis project, I found this group of expat baby boomers down in Mexico who had moved to an area called Lake Chapala and had been thriving for 70 plus years now. And
Oh,
so
wow.
yeah, and they're
I didn't
still.
know it was that long.
Oh yeah, yeah. Right during and following World War II, a lot of GIs took advantage of the cheap education and the kind of booming art scene, if you will, in Mexico, and opted to move to Mexico to pursue degrees in art,
Yeah.
and so these little kind of artsy U.S. and Canadian expat villages started to spring up, and so that's how I found this topic and got interested in these people, was through that thesis project. And so, every year since that had been published, I'd get a lot of emails and phone calls and, friends and family asking me, well, where else are people? Because I only studied this one little area.
Yeah.
well, where else are people going and what are they like and why do they stay there and are they scared and is it dangerous and what's it cost? And so a couple years ago, I had always been running the idea of doing a book for, consumers, if you will, or lay
Yeah.
people, something outside of the social science realm. And a couple of years ago, I realized, gosh, a lot of baby boomers are already retired, and a lot more are going to be retired pretty soon. And if I'm going to do anything that's going to be valuable to them, I better get on it. I better get on it now. So 2 or 3 years ago, I kind of dusted off the original manuscript and hired a student of mine to update some of the research from and statistics from that original study, and then set out on more travel and trips and started surveying baby boomers all over Mexico. And that culminated in the publishing of this book about 5 months ago.
Wow, that's awesome. Now, when you went down yourself to do your research, did you go by yourself? Did you take your family? Was it just a graduate student just going on to Mexico, just kind of winging it, or
Yeah, I went with my family a couple times, and then really to wrap it up, I just went down by myself so I could, kind of get solely focused on the project and get it wrapped up. And that was the first international travel I'd ever done by myself, so it was actually pretty exciting to just head down there, knowing that even more than ever I was going to have to figure things out on my own, figure out
yeah?
language on my own, and logistics on my own. And like I said, the Mexican people are very gracious and welcoming, so it wasn't hard at all. But yeah, did a lot of little travel, little villages by myself.
Oh wow! Did you have any sort of culture shocks that you can? Is there anything that stood out in your mind that you were just like, "Whoa, this would never happen in the U.S."
Um, Other than the
Food?
the friendliness of everybody, no, I think I did when I originally went down, as I kind of write in my book. I grew up in small town rural America up in the Northwest in Washington State, right on the Washington-Idaho border. And so most of my life, like I just never really thought about the world outside of the United States. The things that I did see, you know, led me to believe that, America had the best of everything. And there, outside of entertaining myself, there wasn't really any real reason to go outside of the United States. And it was really, it wasn't until later in my life that I started to question whether or not the United States had the best of everything. And
Mm,
so that first trip in 2000, I think it was 2007 or 2000, yeah, 2007 or 8, to Mexico, was my first trip outside of the United States. And I think the shock for me, more than a culture shock, was, based on everything I'd been reading in the media, based on kind of what I had come to understand about Mexico, largely from just what people around me said about it, I kind of expected to find this second or third world poor
yes.
country. At the time, the loop in the media was that everybody in Mexico wanted to sneak into the United States, so I had
Yes.
perception that it was going to be pretty poor and pretty dangerous. And when I got down there, I found it to be very modern, very metropolitan. Some areas very art centric. The architecture and some of the buildings are just they're old, lovely, and wonderful. Cobblestone streets, and
Yes.
I just that was the shock. Was, my God, this place is beautiful. uh,
Yeah.
the people around here look like me, they act like me, in the sense
Yeah.
that, like, I think I said in the book, there's some people having lattes, there's some people waiting for the bus, there's some businessmen reading the newspaper. It just had an urban metropolitan feel that was different, but at the same time very familiar and comfortable.
I know, like you mentioned, what we're conditioned to think and what we actually find. I mean, for years, you watch television and all you see is like, hanging bodies from the side of the bridge, and everything is all like, the cartel. And, you know more about the cartel than you know more about the people, the actual people. And then to go there and sit yourself, because I'm sure people were probably warning you, oh, you don't want to go there, right? Because they kill people there.
Right.
And then
But
you
yeah,
get there and it's like, okay, it's not exactly what they told me. So
right.
travel is really important, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, that's what I say, and again, that's the great heartbreak of the COVID crisis. Is I think travel is the road to peace, and I think if
Yes.
you lock yourself out from exploring and meeting people of other cultures or going to other countries and experiencing other cultures, then you really lock yourself out of the great wealth of knowledge and understanding about people in general and the world as your home. I
Yeah.
tell people now, I mean, since I started this journey and since that first trip to Mexico in 2007, I've visited almost every continent in the world. I've traveled the world,
Cool.
and I tell people I'm a world citizen now. Like
Yes.
I love and appreciate people from everywhere, and
Yeah.
I can't. I'm not going to go back to thinking there's something
Ex-
special or exceptional about me just because I'm an American.
exactly. That is
Yeah.
fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that because I think more people should travel. I know a lot of people, especially Americans, are conditioned to think that it is the greatest country. It's the only place to be. Every place else is inferior to it. But when you
Mhm.
travel and you see, it's different, but it doesn't make it any worse. It's just
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
And
I
and
hope.
then
I hope. Go go ahead.
oh,
I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, and then you also can come to recognize what is special and wonderful about the United States. I think that's
Very
an
true.
equally important perspective. Is if you don't get out of here, then when you are here, you don't know what's worth preserving. And now I even have a better understanding of what's important about the United States and special about it and worth preserving, which I wouldn't have had if I hadn't visited other countries and cultures.
Very good point, which is very true. One thing I noticed about the book, the recurring theme of why the baby boomers leave for the other side of the wall is ageism,
Hmm.
which I think is just fascinating because I know, like in the US, of course, employment is at will. So they can get rid of you. They don't want to hire you if you're old. Did you find that it was such a big reason? Was that the most prevailing reason why people were moving down there?
I don't. I think it is when you think about ageism in terms of the cultural shifts in the United States, in the sense that um, we have become such a hyper consumer focused culture, and that our media puts focus and attention towards those people they think are going to spend the most rapidly,
Yes.
and those are not baby boomers anymore. And so what's happened,
No.
the consumer culture in the United States has really shifted towards a youth culture, and and buy, and it's for these baby boomers, this authentic interaction that you might have with somebody that isn't doesn't require a purchase or some kind of transaction. They feel that's what's been lost in the United States, and because of that, they don't feel that they have a place there anymore. And I think that that's especially frustrating for a group of people who have spent 25, 35 years of a career trying to build America, to build the
Yeah.
United States into something great and special, and then find out that all that work has been forgotten, if you will, and that there's no longer a place for them. They say things like, we don't see magazines aimed at us anymore, we don't see people who look at us on television or who look like us, on television or in the movies. And then there's also um, this disrespect thing that has popped up, whether it's in the form of, the okay boomer
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of, blanket reaction to an older person's different ideas. Um, or if it's just about this idea that people don't respect their elders anymore. I think
Which
that,
is very true.
yeah,
They
which is
don't.
right, right. And so, you know, I mean, there's a part of them that's, in addition to some of the employment issues that I did discuss, I think that they definitely are feeling pushed out or pressed out of jobs, and that there's fewer opportunities to be hired. And when they get hired, it takes longer to get a job, and they make less money when they finally start working. But I think in addition to that, there's just this kind of loss of community that they're building for themselves down in Mexico.
Now, did you find that a lot of them were recreating their lives from the US? I mean, did you find them like in the Chapala, for instance? Did you find them like in enclaves of like little subdivisions, or were they more integrated into the society?
That's a great question. So when I first started doing research on this topic before I'd even made a trip and even decided that I wanted to pursue it, I read an article by a professor from Connecticut named Dr. David Truly, and he had written a paper on that very topic. He had found the same group of expats, and he had noticed that a small number of them had opted to go build these gated communities and do what he called was importing a lifestyle. So
Mm,
their motivation for moving to Mexico was strictly to live well on the cheap and basically have nothing to do with their local
with the
Mexican community or culture. But the
oh,
majority of the people that I came across and talked to and interviewed, they were proactive about being a part of the local community, about learning Spanish, about understanding the holidays and customs. And, I think that the reason for that is twofold. One, most importantly, you're entering a foreign community, right?
yes,
You're going somewhere that's not your home. And so
yeah,
you
exactly.
pretty high level of graciousness and acceptance yourself, or else the
Yeah,
people that are around you are just going to kick you out of there, right? So
exactly.
they don't want you coming down there and changing their geography or their life or their style. And the second thing is I found that the people who migrate, baby boomers who migrate to Mexico, are actually very highly educated people. So if the Mexico boomers, as I refer to them in my book, were their own generation, they would be the most educated generation we've ever seen in the United States. And what I mean by that is most of them have 4-year college degrees, and a good percentage of them have masters and PhDs. And so I think that type of person is looking also to have continued intellectual challenge, and I think that moving to Mexico uh, does that as well. In the book, I talk about research about how cognitive challenge helps extend your life by
Yes,
just period of years, right? And then
yeah,
it improves your quality of life. And I think that going to Mexico as an older adult and embracing the challenge of getting to know a new culture, new customs, and a new language actually helps these folks thrive. And so I
yeah,
think that's another reason they're there, is because they're there on purpose. They're there to meet a new challenge.
definitely. You mentioned something I was going to touch upon. You said they were highly educated, which means, which corresponds to the fact that they're probably a little bit more well off as well. So they
Mhm.
take advantage of that geographic arbitrage part of the equation. Like they go there to have a better life, right? Better weather, and the live a more luxurious life, right? For
Mm,
less, because exchange rate wise,
yeah.
it's a much better deal to be there. Your money stretches along, goes a longer way, doesn't it?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, without a doubt. But I don't know if luxurious lifestyle is the right term. Although um, there are some folks there who are living what I would consider a very luxurious lifestyle very cheaply. I think it wasn't unusual for me to talk to a married couple who was living off pension or social security somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,800 a month, who had a home that they rented. The home had a pool.
Mm.
They had a pool person, a landscaping person,
That's
and
pretty luxurious.
a housekeeper. Yeah. So, they're not living in a luxury mansion by any stretch of the imagination, but they're certainly having everything that they need taken care of on the cheap.
Yeah.
But the big finding in the book, or one of the big findings in the book, was that, yes, you're absolutely right. The people who end up retiring in Mexico are actually way better off financially than their US counterparts on average. And they're really upper income, high income earners. Uh, they're not the 1% or the 5%, but they're definitely the top 25%. But what they wanted to do is retire earlier, not necessarily stretch their retirement dollars. And so, when you think about retirement yourself, there's a balance of, the longer I work, the more money I have, the better I can live in
Mm.
retirement, right? And
Yeah.
conversely, these folks are saying, well, the less I, the less uh,
Mm.
the shorter time I want to work, the faster I want to retire, I can do that in Mexico. And on average, they're retiring 5 years earlier than their US counterparts. And you're absolutely right. They're able to do that because of the cost of living in Mexico is so low.
And I think Mexico is a great place to be because, first of all, it's so close to America. You can just always come back if it doesn't work out, right? You can dip your
That's right.
toes in kind of
Yeah.
kind of situation and check it out and see. I mean, because
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not for everyone. Did you find that a lot of people that were there wanted to come back, or were they really happy being there?
So the people that I interviewed largely were very happy being there. I think, one of the questions I asked at the conclusion in the financial section was, if money was no issue, you win the lottery or whatever the case may be,
Hmm.
where would you go? Where would you move? And over 80% of them said they would stay right where they were. They don't, that they didn't have any interest in moving.
Ah,
A couple other percent said they'd move somewhere else in Mexico, and I think it was only like 13% or something along those lines who said if money was no longer an issue, they'd move back to the United States. So it's really the majority of the people down there are financially secure, they're happy, and they're living where they prefer to live, not where they have to live.
that's fantastic.
Mhm.
And the healthcare, I can assume, if they choose to stay there, the healthcare must be just fine as well.
Yeah, I mean, behind safety, the second question I'm generally asked by people back here in the United States is, well, what about healthcare? And the answer from the people that I surveyed is the healthcare is comparable to the healthcare they receive in the United States. If I heard one gripe, it was that maybe, routine visits or something like that took a little longer to book and a little longer to get into the doctor. But as far as common procedures or healthcare itself, a lot of the folks said that their entire treatment was generally less expensive than their copays back in the United
Yeah.
States. um, that they didn't have any fear of getting poorer healthcare. I think if there is any question on the healthcare front, it is what to do when you have a catastrophic injury and you require long-term care, because in general the Mexican culture does not have this commodified retirement like we do in the United States. There are not blocks of nursing homes or assisted living facilities because in general the family takes care
The
of the older.
family, exactly.
Yeah. So if you're an older American who's developing a chronic condition or has a chronic condition, and you're not supported by family there, then I do think you have reason to think, okay, what happens when I need help in and out of the tub, or what happens when I need help driving to the grocery store and stuff. So those are probably the concerns, and I think those are the concerns for the newer folks who have just arrived, because the the rate in which they're arriving today is 10 times faster than it was 12 years ago. A lot more baby boomers are showing up there now. They're showing up without a social network in place. They don't know anybody there. They don't have friends there. They don't have family there. And that's wildly different than what it was 12 years ago. And
Yeah.
I think that's been spawned by, the internet and the ease of talking to people online and forming relationships online. People just feel more comfortable kind of showing up with a suitcase. Uh,
Yeah.
but but what that's done is it's also kind of created a little imbalance on the long term medical care side too. And so what I've seen over the last year or two, just in social network feeds and news sites that I monitor, is a lot of U.S. looking long term care, elderly care facilities kind of popping up and advertising to these groups on social. So I think
Hmm.
someone else also sees the need
Potential.
arising, and someone else has decided they're going to try and make a buck or a peso off of it.
Yeah. I don't blame them. I mean, I see the same thing here in Spain. Like a lot of people, like you said, it's the family that takes care of you if you're older. But here, the respect is so much, it's just there.
Hmm.
And I mean, we came here to Spain because it's a lot cheaper for us. We can have the same kind of life, and the money goes a long way because everything is so much less.
Hmm.
And I can see, you know, ads here as well where people, a lot of British people come here, they just retire here. They head for Spain, Alicante, and all the beach areas. And
Hmm.
so their companies kind of started popping up doing like long term care because usually what they do is they hire like foreigners that are here from other Spanish speaking countries to take care of them full time because they can do that on the cheap. But like you
Mhm.
said, somebody's out there looking and going, "Hey, that's that's a
Mhm.
way to make money," because you see the question asked, "What happens if we get sick?" And you're
Mhm.
older and you need help like that. So I think somebody's going to make make some money if they look into it.
I think so. Yeah, no doubt.
Not me though. I'm too old for that.
You'll be making some money.
No, I said my backup plan is always like, okay, his mom is in Rome. I said if it ever gets to that point, we're not
Mm.
going back to the US, but we're so close to Rome, we'll just go there and just use his medical health. But even the medical health here is so much, it's just very good, and we pay so little, and
Mm.
so it makes life a lot easier when you don't have to worry about things like healthcare, which is so expensive in the US.
Yeah.
And I assume the boomers also have, or they're going to have Medicare. So if they needed healthcare, since it's so close, they could still come back home and get the care that they needed.
Yeah, that's one thing I have to caution people about, is if you are dependent on Medicaid or Medicare for your health insurance or your health care, you cannot use that outside of the United States, whether it's Mexico, Spain, or anywhere else. And so the issue that creates is that some of those folks who are lower income and dependent on that have to travel back and forth between the United States and Mexico to pick up prescriptions or to have medical procedures done. That being said, if you are a person of of means, as they say down there, and those means aren't very much at all as far as your income goes, you can apply for residency there, either permanent or temporary.
Mhm.
And once you become a permanent resident, then you're eligible for most of Mexico's what do they call socialized medicine, if you will, their national health care. And so a lot
Yes.
of the boomers down there, they just take advantage of that. And like I said before, it's always cheaper than back in the US, and they don't have any issues about the care. But if you're not someone who can or plans to become a resident and you're not down there working for a Mexican company, it's a lot harder to get health care for sure.
Hmm. It would make sense. So obviously, if you're going to go there, that's something you definitely want to think about your healthcare, especially if you're not going to become a legal resident. Because I know they let you come in for 6 months and then you can leave again. But if you plan on staying there, it makes sense to get yourself registered so you can have access to the national health insurance.
Yeah, and that process does not take very long at all. In a lot of countries, I'm not sure what it is in Spain, but a lot of places you got to go live there for 3 years, 5 years, or something like that to become a resident. And then in Mexico, you can start that process in as little as 4 months. So that's another reason that I think Mexico is attractive is those residency requirements are nowhere near as tedious or lengthy as other countries.
Hmm. See, if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking about moving to Mexico, keep in mind what Travis just said. So make sure you have all your um, ducks in a row, so to speak, and think about that because you don't want to be stuck out there with no health insurance. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we touched upon safety before. Can you elaborate a little more on that? I mean, do they feel safe enough being there?
Yes, they feel very safe. I think somewhere near half of the people I interviewed said they felt Mexico was as safe or safer than the United States. Something like 92% of them felt like they were safer from the threat of terrorism in Mexico than they were in the United States.
Very
Um,
true.
but yeah, safety is the number one question I'm asked about from people outside of the United States. And my answer is that Mexico is it can be a very dangerous country for certain people in certain places. And, unfortunately, I just read an article last week that the murder rate in Mexico is the highest that it's been in, I think, at least 10 years or something like that. The cartel violence has really heated up because, 65% of the army that was fighting them has been moved back to the cities to help enforce quarantine rules and things of that
Oh,
nature. But I say, but if you're an American citizen in the United States, that violence rarely touches you or affects you. And I think
Hmm.
the reason that we hear about it when it does so much back here is because we actually hear about it every single time an American is harmed in Mexico. And
Yes.
because it happens so little, it actually makes the news very frequently. I say it's kind of like shark attacks. You know, you hear about every single shark attack that happens in the world, but the truth is, we hear about it because they're so rare, you know, and they're so
Yes.
exceptional. And but what it leaves you with is the sense that sharks are attacking people all the time, and that's just not the case. I ran some statistical analysis, basically showing that you're more likely to be caught in the crossfire or be shot in Mexico, or I'm sorry, in Chicago or Washington D.C. than you are as a U.S. citizen in
Mm.
Mexico. In fact, you're 30 times more likely to be killed in a car accident or a motorcycle accident or something to that effect. But
Yeah.
it's just very unusual that an American is threatened with violence or experiences violence in Mexico, and that's what the baby boomers down there told me. They said
Yeah.
they know it exists. You got to be careful, like you got to be anywhere else,
Of
but they do
course.
not feel like they are personally threatened or that they are the target of any of this.
Yeah.
Uh, and so they feel very safe. I think if that were to change, I think that they would flee. But at the rate that they're going there and staying there, it
Yeah.
does not appear to me that crime and violence are a threat to them.
Oh, that's good to know. That's definitely good to know. Now, one other question. I know, like, on my blog, we have a lot of people that move to Valencia or Spain, and they're thinking about it. So I get a lot of email from people, especially single older women who want to know what the dating scene is like in Valencia.
Hmm.
Now, were you able to touch upon that? I know you were able to talk to some people. How's the single life there for women, mostly? Because very rarely do men write about it.
Well, that was one of the unexpected findings that I discovered this second time around was that the rate of single women moving to Mexico had really jumped, and that they were twice as likely to move to Mexico by themselves as a single man, and so
Wow.
so I guess the better question is what's the single scene like for single men there because it sounds like
Yeah.
it's pretty good.
It's
That like a
true.
Beach Boys song that says two girls for every boy or something like that.
And they're fighting on the streets, like.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean that, that was cool to find out on, I mean, on the dating side. I thought that was really interesting too. But I think it also speaks to kind of, I talk about in the book how divorce actually affects women way worse than it affects men, and how the high rate of divorce among baby boomers has left a lot of women in precarious financial situations. And so to
Yeah,
find that a lot of recently divorced or single women had moved to Mexico as a way to improve their quality of life and have a better sustained retirement was a really interesting finding. I mean, it's a testament to kind of the way things have changed for women in general, and that within the baby boomer generation exists this group of women who really have this grit, this tenacity, this individualism, and just this adventurous spirit to up and say, well, I'm going to Mexico and I'm going by myself when I
can
get
you
there. I mean,
imagine?
yeah, it's brave, and you know what? Truth be told, I had a lot of fun with those women. I really did. They were dragging
Because
me
it's like,
around by
let's
my
have a glass
feet.
of water, let's have a
Yeah,
margarita and talk about
yeah,
it.
yeah. They were taking me to all the great bars and the hot spots and the parties. I mean, it was a lot of fun. We had a good time.
That's fantastic. That's great. I think I would be the same way if I was a widow or something. I'd be like, let's why not? Life is to be enjoyed. And I'm like, you're older, you know what you want, you have common sense, you're obviously not going to put yourself in a dangerous situation, but you can make assessments on people when you meet them, and you form a circle, you start getting to know other people, and before you know it, you're one of the people there. You're actually getting along with people and integrating yourself into society.
Correct.
Fun at a
Yeah,
cheaper price than in the US, right?
yeah,
Because your
exactly.
worries are gone. I know one of the women that he had interviewed mentioned something about, like, she was running a yoga studio and she had never felt at peace as
Hmm.
much as she did there. I mean,
Hmm.
she's thriving.
She's thriving, and I had, as far as peace goes, I had one of the most transformative experiences of my life at her studio, where I didn't do yoga. I just, I had been talking to her, and I said, okay, well, I'll come to the studio, I'll do yoga in the morning with you, and I'll interview you afterwards, just as like I'll just kind of dive into your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And we were finishing the session, and she had me kind of, I think there was probably 8 of us in there, some baby boomers and then myself, and I'm not a baby boomer. I'm a Gen Xer. I
Gen
just turned
X.
I just turned
I
42
missed you
myself.
by 1 year. I missed that by 1 year.
Um, so comparable to me, that the people I was doing the yoga with were a lot older than me, but we were kind of doing this relaxation part. The hard yoga had stopped, and we were kind of going into our can't remember what it's called, but the quiet meditation part, and she had me leaning over this kind of foam roller, and my head is on the ground and my ears are perked back. She's got a glass door that's the front of her yoga studio, and outside that glass door is a little lovely fountain and a garden. And I'm
Mhm.
sitting there, and I realized to myself in that moment that that was the first time I had felt total peace and quiet. Like, I couldn't hear a
Oh,
car,
wow.
couldn't
Uh-huh.
hear an airplane. I couldn't hear people chatting on the street. All I could hear was the quiet bubble of that fountain, and just kind of the wind rustling, and through the leaves. And I thought, this is how I want to die. I want to
Yeah.
come to a place, and I want to leave in peace. I want to be in peace. I don't want to be in some
Yeah.
industrial hospital. I don't want to hear cars and ambulances and airplanes and all of that stuff. I just want this kind of peace. And so,
It's
since
Nirvana, right? It's
that, yeah, exactly.
that sounds awesome. I mean, I would like to go like that too. I mean, I want to be by sleeping, doing something I love, maybe having a margarita when I die. That's pretty much it.
Mhm. But I think that
That's
kind of speaks to, I think, what other people there experience, right? Is this, it's almost like a timeout from the crazy hustle and bustle of US consumer culture. And it's this, I don't know, this opportunity to not even hear yourself think, but not to hear anything. And it's
yeah.
just so hard to find that these days.
Yes, it is. It's a nice reset. Yeah,
Hmm.
I was, all for when we started talking about early retirement and wanting to like stop working. I was all ready for it because I was tired of 12-hour work days and, you know, even till today, 7 years after I stopped working, I still can't stand the sound of a telephone. I hate it because all I hear is like 7 pharmacy calls,
Yeah.
5 doctor calls. I'm like, it gives you anxiety. And even every once in a while, my husband will come behind me and say 5 pharmacy calls, and I just still jump. 'Cause so so I'm really happy to not. I use my phone for like playing words with friends and Scrabble, and that's pretty much it. I never answer the phone, only email. It's just
Uh-huh.
I like my life. I like the quiet, the slower kind of pace here in Spain. I'm like, it fits me, and I'm
Yep.
perfectly happy doing this for a long time, so I can see how the women can also love it there.
Hmm. Hmm. Very
Now
true.
we'll round this interview up with what places do you find that most people settle? Are there like hotspots in Mexico where everybody goes, or are they just kind of all over?
There are some hot spots, definitely. Lake Chapala that I talked about has a permanent population of close to 20,000 US and Canadian expats. So you
Wow.
get out there and you walk around that lake, and you see um, you hear a lot of people talking in English. So, uh,
Wow.
San,
20,000.
yes, yes. Yes. I mean, and I had, and that's really grown, I think, from like 12,500 from the time I was first there. That's what I said, this phenomenon, if you will, has really accelerated over the last 10 years. But, in San Miguel de Allende, which is more central
Uh,
Mexico, and is
uh-huh.
the town in which I had that great experience at the yoga studio, I think that they have something like close to 12,000 permanent
I believe
US
it.
residents. And then there are places like Puerto Vallarta, which people I'm sure have heard of. There's Cancun, there's Cabo, and those places lean more towards what we were talking about a little bit earlier, which is a more traditional U.S. infrastructure, housing,
Mm,
transportation, restaurants, and unfortunately cost. Right, so
of course.
you go to those beach resort type communities to live, and the savings is not really that great, and the opportunity to be part of an existing Mexican culture is limited too, because those are really intentional communities meant for people to come down, enjoy the oceans and the scenery, and be comfortable. And so they're not necessarily authentic Mexican communities, if you will. That's not to
Yeah.
say that they're not great and don't have value. They really do. But
Yeah.
that being said, the more inland that you go, it's my opinion, the more authentic kind of Mexican life you're going to have, and the less expensive it's going to be, and so the better you'll be able to live, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. That's great because, I know one of the things that you had said was that Mexico, of course, is not for everyone,
It is
which is
not.
true.
Hmm.
You have to be used to life a little bit slower. You have to realize that there are way things get done, like the mañana. Here it's like
Yep.
mañana, mañana. A door broke like like 10 days ago, and the,
Uh-huh.
the part was coming from Barcelona. It took them 8 days to order it, and we couldn't leave the house because it was broken from the outside. So if we left, we couldn't get back in. And they're just like, yeah, maybe we'll have it tomorrow. Yeah, maybe we'll have it tomorrow.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
just gonna laugh because if you can't handle that kind of thing, you're gonna
Right.
be really disappointed.
Right. That's right. That's right. And I think those are good things to have to deal with, because I think they slow your own mind.
Yes.
And I think they help you see what is and isn't important. And I think sometimes in the United States, we're a little, we think everything's important, and sometimes
Yeah,
it's just not.
it's very true. Travis, thank you so much for talking to me today. For anybody listening to this podcast, make sure you check out his website, travisluther.com. Also going to put this on the blog post so you have all the information. So make sure you check out the website. It tells you everything you need to know about moving to Mexico. And the book is called The Fun Side of the Wall: Baby Boomer Retirement in Mexico. And in addition to the fun stuff that you can find in there, there are also stories, like interviews and stories of the actual people that live there. So you're getting good information, and this will be something that will prepare you for a great life in Mexico if that's what you choose. So definitely, you want to check out his website. You want to check out the book. It's available on Amazon, on Kindle, and in hardcover. Once again, the book name is The Fun Side of the Wall. And as you've heard the last half an hour, it definitely is the fun side of the wall. Thanks again, Travis. It's been fun talking to you.
You as well. I'm glad we connected. Thanks, Kim.
Well, that's our show for today. We appreciate you tuning in. Remember, you can always get the show notes on nextbiteoflife.com. And if you're enjoying what you're listening to, please make sure to subscribe to the show.